For those who haven't encountered your work, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about who you are and your journey and what inspired Roar.
Thank you, Ines. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. It's lovely to meet you all. I am Marilise de Villiers Basson, and yes, I have been, I'd say an accidental entrepreneur for almost 10 years now. Started my life in the sort of corporate world as a chartered accountant. Very realized that that was not my forte. Also, early on realized that I wanted to, be the person in the front of the room delivering the induction training. So, as a trainee accountant, received some induction training when we joined the firm. And 3 years later, I became the training manager for the Western Cape. So here in South Africa, where I now live, I did a bit of a detour to England, but I'll come back to that. But yeah, very much knew about 20 years ago that my passion is in people and development, and I did that in corporates for my firm for many years until about 10 years ago I encountered a very awful, now amazing experience with a bully. And I say amazing now because obviously with the experience being awful at the time, it actually turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. And again, I'll come back to that. But really, I encountered a really serious bullying situation, very toxic person in the workplace, also happened to be the boss. And it sort of carried on for about 4 years, and slowly but surely it just chipped away at my confidence. And the harder he bullied us, the harder I tried to please him, and it just got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. So yeah, complete and utter burnout situation. Daily anxiety attacks, just really not in very good health, and just had my moment where I said enough is enough, and so stepped away. And that's how Roar was born, slowly but surely, because I became really passionate about speaking up and people speaking up in the workplace. Initially, it was about speaking up against the bully, but also it became a lot more than that, because of course when you experience and encounter a situation like that, you also then on the path to your healing recognize, which happens to be the first step of the ROAR process, recognize that it's deep rooted in childhood and trauma. And so those of you who have watched my TEDx, Have You Found Your Raw, will know that as a young girl, I also experienced sexual abuse. And so really that theme of abuse, whether it's, sexual abuse and self-abuse. So shortly after that, I developed quite a serious eating disorder for many years, for 15 years, various forms of obsessive eating, not eating, obsessive exercising, a very complex relationship with food. Happy to say that today it's better. But really, the sort of recurring theme of abuse in my life. And so Roar very much is about empowering individuals to speak up, and especially speak up in abusive scenarios, situations.
Not an easy journey, but one that you've come to embrace and find strength in because upon reflection, I know looking at my own journey, it's those challenging times that shape the person that you become and give you the strength to do the type of work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I have a little phrase I use: is your mess becomes your message. You always have a choice. I know a lot of times when I say to people you have a choice, it's hard to hear, because often we don't feel like we have a choice,
Mhm.
especially in an abusive relationship. So I say that with a lot of love and respect, but it is ultimately, the choice to take the meaning and the learning from every situation, every scenario that you faced in life.
Yeah. And Roar is your business, but it's also your book.
Yes, my first book. So Roar, How to Tame the Bully, inside and out. As I sort of left my corporate career and started on my own with absolutely no idea what I was going to do with my life, I slowly but surely started to get back my health. So very, very intuitively knew that that was the first step I had to take, was to get my physical health back on track. So started working with a very high level transformation coach. And she really helped me, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, also get sort of back into a healthy space. And then, then I had that sort of anger about what happened. And I really wanted to sort of stand for something and talk about this silent epidemic in the workplace. And so workplace bullying became the context of the book. And so I talk about what it is. I also talk about narcissism and understanding how that bullying behavior is kind of narcissistic behavior, and talk about different types of narcissistic behaviors. Also presencing with people that, we're all narcissistic at times. That's not just a label that you put on someone. I think we all have tendencies. So kind of normalize the conversation about around narcissism a little bit more. And then the role of leaders. So I talk about the toxic trio and really the responsibility leaders have to protect people in the workplace, and then also to empower the individual to protect themselves. And so ultimately the book has become, the ROAR book has become a self-empowerment book. And it's really about you as an individual and the responsibility that you have to live your best life. And so the RAW blueprints is very much shaped around finding your authentic purpose, like igniting your authentic purpose, winning your inner game. So that's really the inner, the thoughts and the feelings and, the conversations that you have with yourself. And then, of course, winning the outer game, which is the conversations you have with other people. So your words and your actions, your energy, how you manage your energy outwards. And then ROAR, which is the courageous conversation, which is the courage to face the difficult conversations head on. So that's kind of the blueprints and how it's sort of shaped in the book as well.
Excellent. Super aligned with the concepts and ideas, and this is why we connected, and I've been on your podcast. We'll put a link in the show notes. Super aligned. I love that it's a holistic model and it incorporates all of those dimensions: the inner game, the outer game, how you interact with yourself and the world, which leads me to the inner bully. So you've said that we often bully ourselves before anyone else does. What does that inner bully sound like, and how can we tame it?
Yeah, so I think, we all, and there are different labels. So I've labeled it an inner bully, inner critic, inner villain, but it's that sort of ego voice. It's that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough, you're not worthy. Who do you think you are to do X, Y, Z? Oh, you're too old. If it hasn't happened by now, it will never happen. So it's all that sort of little doubtful conversations, the fear conversations in your mind, and we all have it. I often say, we wouldn't speak to our best friend the way we speak to ourselves. We really, really have this kind of prison in our minds. We've created this prison in our minds where, there's a lot of noise, whether it's, in my case, there's a lot of food noise or a lot of doubt noise or a lot of fear noise. And unfortunately, that bully voice is kind of the loudest. It's a screamy voice as well. So we all have to work very hard to tame that voice, to silence that voice, so that we can actually hear the truth and the higher self, the truthful voice, because there are these two voices, right? So it's really about, how do you tame that bully? How do you silence that bully voice and then elevate and amplify the truth?
For me, that inner bully pops up not usually, sometimes in the last 10 minutes before I fall asleep. And it's so annoying because I'll lie down, and it's usually during times of high pressure and intensity that it pops up and starts saying, "Who do you think you are? This is all going to go really badly. Why are you doing all of these things? Why are you taking these risks? What's the point of this podcast? What's the point of, who are you to stand up in front of an audience?" And it's horrible and it's relentless, and it takes some work to replace that inner bully with something else, like your inner champion or something along those lines. What do you find for yourself?
Yes, so I think it's when we do big things in our lives, when
Mm.
we do hard things, right? You've written books, you go on stages, you have big missions. We both have big missions, right? So
Yeah.
the bigger your mission, I think the more you come up against those limitations, those doubts, those fears. And I think that's where I think we've got to accept that it's kind of always going to be there. But
Mm.
it's how you almost have almost like date it, like have a relationship with it. I mean, I've never said this out loud, but I'm thinking out loud now. That's like, actually, what you actually think about this voice, and you actually change the way you perceive the voice. So not necessarily as a bad thing and as a terrible thing, but as a helpful voice. If you think about the ego voice, and you think about, when you have those tendencies to want to prove yourself, or when you get a little bit defensive because you want to sort of just protect your views or protect yourself, there's kind of like those behaviors, and those are actually very valid behaviors. Those are very valid conversations, because up until a point, that those voices, those ego tones, for want of a better word, have actually protected you, as a child, so it's kept you safe. So all I'm saying is recognize, again, step one of the RAW process is recognize it and then catch it, because then it's about the meaning you attach to it. You don't want to attach the meaning, which is the unhelpful spiraling meaning, which is going to send you down that, rabbit hole. The meaning you want to give it is the truth. And that's the dance, that's the balance, that's the art, I would say, in terms of, okay, I recognize this voice, I recognize why it's there, I recognize that it's trying to protect me from something, but actually it's not helping me move forwards. So now what is the new conversation? What is the new question I can ask? And that's the process, and it's repetition, it's constant. It's not like a once off tick, move on. It is really a journey, and it
Mhm.
takes years and years and years, and there's always a next level as well.
So true, so true. I love that. Maybe even thank it. It has protected you over the course of your life. I remember when I was in India once upon a time, I tried to dissolve the ego, and I was like, what is this voice that keeps on talking? And I'm going to try and get rid of it. And I can tell you what, that exercise is futile unless you're willing to spend about 20 years in a cave. And I simply wasn't. But eventually you can integrate it and just go, okay, that's just another dimension of me, and I'll name the emotion. So what I try and do is go, oh, that's a little bit of anxiety. And just by naming it, it starts to reduce the intensity a little bit. And
Absolutely.
I like your idea of, using that first step, just recognize it. And then you can start to move forward. That's so good. Can you maybe walk us through the other steps in the raw framework?
Yes. Recognize, observe, assert, redirect. So the recognize and the observe is what happens inside. It's the inner game. It's the thoughts and the feelings. So that's very much, recognize it and observe it. So stay with it. Be present with it. I think often you have something that comes up in your mind, and you sort of immediately want to try and push it aside, put it in a box, and that's been my sort of default behavior over the years, where I've literally, put it away, put it aside, and hope it's going to go away, and then it sort of comes back with a vengeance. So for me, it's very much about, as you say, recognize what's happening, staying with it, being present with it, observing it, and really then moving forwards with it. So moving through it. You can't put it away. You can't put it aside. You've got to move through this now. And that's what the assert and the redirect is all about. So if the assert is a conversation with yourself, it is actually that conversation you have. So let's say you actually recognize the ego voice. You say, thank you. You assert, you say, thank you. You appreciate. So it's very much that, or you can say, hey, how do I know this is true? I don't, what proof do I have that this is true? So you can
Mm.
also ask. So the assert can also be a question. So that's kind of when it's with yourself. But then obviously, originally, the ROAR process was designed to face the difficult conversation with the bully, right? So the assert was a very specific term, asserting, because it is about being confident in that scenario with the bully, but not necessarily getting emotional or defensive. So the assert step for me is so vital, because it's where you stand in your power. It's where you really, really stand in your power, and you approach the bully from a I'm okay, you're okay perspective, even though you probably don't feel okay. And then the redirect is the reframe. It's the moving the conversation to a place where it's productive, where it's a win-win outcome for both parties. And so the process is very adaptable, and you can sort of change it, whether it's a conversation with yourself, whether it's a conversation with someone else. But essentially, those 4 steps really just help you have a structure when you navigate a difficult conversation.
Does the bully sometimes respond well to assertiveness? So if you do create the right conditions and you turn up with the right mindset, uh, in
Yes.
your experience and in your coaching, can you change a bully, or is that just a bridge too far?
So I think very few bullies are nasty people. So I think we've got to really differentiate between like a bully, which is a narcissistic bully, and a bully who is an accidental bully. So you
Mm.
often have scenarios, especially in the workplace, where someone will exhibit bullying behavior. And, what I always say to people is, if you have the conversation with that person in a confident, assertive way, and you really explain well to them the impact that their behavior has had on you, and they actually change their behavior, that to me is really positive. So, yes, it's always worth the try. You always have to try, but that means that you've got to be courageous. You've got to be sort of vulnerable to put yourself in a position where you face that difficult conversation. Now, there's a line that you don't want to cross, So if you feel like you are not safe, and if you don't feel like you have that psychological safety, if you're working with a very, very dangerous bully, you've got to be very careful, because there is a line. And I want to be very, very clear that, if you've worked with someone over a long period of time, and like in my case, 3 or 4 years, there was just a line that I didn't cross anymore. And then I would say it wasn't possible for me anymore. Um, so it's always worth, in the early days, to test the waters, to understand, is this
Hmm.
person a really toxic individual, or are they actually just accidentally, are they just not aware, have they just got some biases? And that's the thing that we want to make sure we establish, but never put yourself in a dangerous situation.
Hmm. That's such a good point. I worked with someone once who had zero empathy. I thought they were a bully. And then we did a workplace survey tool, which I ran, and it shocked me. I realized, oh, this person is just incredibly logical, analytical, rational, no emotion. So it turned out that they weren't a bully, and everyone was coming to me, we're being bullied, we're being bullied, it's relentless. And then it turned out that they actually just didn't have any emotional intelligence. So equipped with that knowledge, we could all change our behavior style, which is not easy, but to turn up with a lot of evidence and a lot of statistics and a lot of research to back up whatever it is that we were feeling, and try to explain feelings more effectively. And it made quite a big difference. So getting to know these different styles, it turned out that it was just maybe slightly on the spectrum. I'm not sure, but it was just
Yes.
someone's behavioral style.
Yes, so
Mm.
so often these are just misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and I've also had to take responsibility for my reactions, for my responses. Because often, it's easy to fight narcissistic behavior with more narcissistic behaviors. So it's also that sort of, clash between two people, where you could argue that both become very, very narcissistic, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I have to be right. I won't let you be right. I want to be right. And so there's just no way in that conversation you can actually find common ground. You can find a way forwards, so I mean, unless I take responsibility for my behavior and I see it for what it is. And I still deal with this a lot in my personal life, a lot with family members, one in particular. And so it's not something I even want to pretend that I've solved. I'm still on the
Yes.
journey, but it's the what do you have control over? You only have control over how you respond. You cannot control the other person's behavior. And I think that for me is so important to remember when you go into a conversation with a difficult individual. You can really only control how you respond. And yes, it's awful when it brings up those emotions where you feel like your heart is beating in your chest, or you feel so resentful. It's
Yeah.
hard sometimes to contain those emotions, but it's important to try really to stay calm, to take a pause, to breathe, and just to try and see the situation for what it is.
Yeah, great advice. And something that's really important for kids. I wish that I was taught these skills at school, because at an all boys school in South Africa, bullying was basically the default. If you weren't, you were either a bully or you were being bullied. And that was the school culture in many ways. And having that assertiveness instead of going into a freeze state would have been a fantastic tool. Yeah. And the same approach could obviously work with kids standing up, obviously with the caveat, as long as you're safe.
Always, always, always. I think that for me is, yeah. And that's where you've
Mhm.
got to trust your instincts as well.
So from roar to more, how did more, MOAR, for those who are wondering, and all of these links are going to be in the show notes, so please do check them out. How did more emerge from the work you started in roar?
Okay, so there's actually three. There's roar, and then there's more, spelled MOAR exclamation mark, the same as roar, and then the third element is soar, so that's SOAR exclamation mark,
I
and
love it.
so that's still in the future. But yeah, that came through me sort of late 2021. I was having a conversation with a coach, and she was sort of just said, we had this conversation about roar and how it's kind of evolving into more. So more is really the momentum and the mastery of roar. So I have had a very, very fascinating journey the last 5 years, where I've gone from living in England, thinking I'm going to live there for the rest of my life, to actually 3 years ago moving back to South Africa. And it happened because I was doing some really deep work, and I was really asking myself this question of what kind of life do I truly want to be living? Would I love? What kind of life would I truly love? And I was really surprised, because it was sort of in a sort of experience with the coach, and I came out of that experience having seen myself landing at Cape Town airport with my husband, picking me up and swilling me around. And, I mean, it's not how it happened, but the whole point was suddenly I had this dream of moving back to South Africa. And that was kind of when the seed was planted. And then about a year ago, my husband and I made the decision with the boys to move back. So since the beginning of 2023, we've been transitioning our life back to South Africa after 18 years in the UK. And it's so beautiful how I'm leaning sort of into my more life, and it's because I'm creating this life where I can work from anywhere, I can do what I love when I love to do it. So both my husband and I still work internationally. So we've created a work environment where we both at home, but we work internationally. So we earn currency, which, obviously living in South Africa is very, very helpful. So the conditions that we've created really has set us up for success, for more, for really that quality of life that we now get to live. And so the whole concept of more is that you are meant for more. and you're also already more than enough. And so for me, this is about energy. This is about treating energy as a currency. And again, in the workplace, and this is why more the second book is going to be in a workplace context again, like the bullying. More is also going to be around workplace, and it's more around workplace well-being. And because I'm really keen to expose is maybe not the right word, but really want to put again a spotlight on well-being in the workplace, and the role of leaders and the responsibility of individuals to really do what they love and to make work magic. And so the title of the book is Making Work Magic, Inside and Out. So again, it's got a strong theme of inside and out, building on the ROAR blueprint. This is about your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. And this is about you taking responsibility for how you show up every day, and also the role of leaders to create the environment and the conditions for people to thrive, to succeed and to thrive. And so that's why I'm bringing in the sort of the magic. The energy is much more expansive. It was difficult to write a book about bullying. I think it's a little bit easier to write a book about well-being because it's about expansive. It's about really about, how do you show up as the best you, and knowing who you are, what you want and what you stand for, and loving it.
Why do you think so many well-being programs miss the mark?
I think they're essentially a tick box activity. And I think a lot of organizations still expect people to sort of check their emotions at the door. So it's like, here we are, we're here to work. And it's that sort of separation of work and life. And I don't think we can afford to do that anymore. Work is life, life is work. So I very much talk about work-life integration, and we come to work, our personal lives ultimately spill over into work. And why shouldn't it? It should be embraced. And so vice versa as well. So it's kind of a societal conditioning that we've got to break. I think it's really about expectations, but it's really about, what we've done in the past is not working. And we've got to rethink our approach. And that's why I'm also positioning kind of this energy as a currency, because I think, we've got to actually start treating energy as a bottom line, as a currency, as something that if we get it right, if we get our people, our greatest asset, productive and thriving, we will succeed as an organization.
It's interesting how for so long people just neglected that. It was about time and micromanagement, whereas energy is the currency. When people are energized and positive and engaged, well, no task is too big, but it only takes one toxic influence to drain that battery rapidly, or some bad practices like multitasking, which, if I'm working on 5 tasks simultaneously, I lose about 80% of my time to context switching. But I'd love to know, you speak about masculine versus feminine energy, ambition versus contentment. How can leaders potentially integrate both?
I think first of all, it's important to acknowledge that, or recognize that we all have both. We all have masculine and feminine energies, and as a woman in a very masculine workplace or industry, I should say. I work in cybersecurity, so I specialize in culture and awareness in the cybersecurity industry, where the number of women in the industry is notoriously low. Before that, I worked in finance, again, where, we have a very, very male-dominating industries. I don't want to make this about men and women. So I really want to be very clear that this is about masculine and feminine energies. You have both, I have both. It's about the balance. It's about, let's recognize that we need both in the workplace. And it's, it's in the way we recruit individuals. It's in the way we run meetings. It's in the way we make people feel welcome and inclusive. So just the awareness of that. And when choosing, away days, not defaulting to golf, but perhaps thinking more broadly around how can we make everybody feel welcome. That's just a silly example, but it's actually an important example too. So yeah, I think for me it's about, and especially also, embracing the feminine energy, the contentment. It can be so cutthroat in corporates, and it's really to say, actually, you know what, it's so important to bring in that nurturing element, because ultimately, I worked for a partner at the firm where I worked many years ago, and she was so good with people, and her male colleagues, just absolutely could not. They were so jealous of her because she was so good with people. And I'm just thinking how different the situation could have been for her had they actually seen her strength and embraced her strength and, elevated that feminine energy and worked with her to create magic, and she ultimately left the firm because of bullying. So that's why I feel so strongly about it. The whole bringing both and making sure it works, and it really works in everybody's favor again, raises the energy.
Through my work at Resilience Institute, we uncovered, and it's no surprise or secret, that performance requires care. And so many organizations are purely focused on performance, KPIs, metrics, which I suppose you could say is masculine energy in a way. It's all about achievement and momentum and winning. And in fact, our research shows that in order to sustain that energy required for performance, we do need to recover and connect and care for ourselves and care for each other. So this very much aligns with what you're saying. You actually need both. And many organizations have realized that to engage Generation Z who are entering the workforce, in fact, it's critical because they don't just want KPIs, they want meaning.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that the meaning, and then that for me ties very strongly with your perspective on values and starting with values and
Mm-hmm.
being really clear about, why you do what you do, what's important to you. I especially as a youngster making very important career decisions. I mean, my son will soon be 18. He's thinking about, what does he study at university? And of course, all he thinks about is what can make me the most money. And I'm trying to sort of influence him to say, hey, it's important that you love it too. But I think it's again, it's that balance of, love it, performance with care. I love that. That's awesome.
Can people love their work? And I ask this in light of the fact I read recently the number one career aspiration for young people is now influencer. Talk about narcissism. I mean, and the reality is maybe only you've got the chances in perhaps the same proportion as someone becoming a Hollywood star or a best-selling author. It's like less than 1% will actually become an influencer. So people are going to have to get used to getting other types of jobs. Any tips for someone to really love what they do?
Okay, so I mean, I'm probably the perfect example of someone who started out life doing something because it was going to give me financial security. So, chartered accountancy, studying accounting at university. My main motivation was because I have to be financially secure. The alternative was to study music. I did amazingly well in piano. Like I had my grade 8 distinction. So I had literally like two options, right? Either study
Mhm.
music or study accounting. And so the decision was hard, and I didn't choose the music because all I could see was I'm not good enough to be a performing artist. I'll probably become a music teacher. I can't really see how that turns out. The problem is, I had a very either or mindset, so I literally just stopped playing piano. I'm almost embarrassed to say it's almost 30 years later, and I haven't really touched the piano much since. But the reflection I've had was really that, I've had this either or mindset. And what I'm now leaning into, I'd say the last 5 years of my life, is the both and mindset. So I think it's important to not just say trade one for the other, or, go to a job that you absolutely hate, but then put your dream on hold. So I mean, I really would love to see more people. Yes, you've got a responsibility. You have to be financially secure. I've got mouths to feed. I've got to be responsible. And I also do what I love. And I do that in my sometimes spare time, sometimes on the weekends, and it's not necessarily an energy suck. It's actually energy giving, because you love it. But it's about having that balance and being able to not be married to the job that you do for the security and feel like you've got this almost like this duty towards the employer, like this skewed sort of loyalty, I would say, towards the employer, to sort of give them all your energy and all your time. Because let's face it, it's an 8 to 5 job, most cases, or finding ways that you can do it part-time, so there are so many options, but I don't think people explore the options because they have this either or mindset. So I've got to do the one or I got to do the other. And so my invitation is always to say, how can you be more both? And if it's something you
Mm.
really love, that you would really love to do, if there's a strong enough desire and a longing and a discontent, you will do it, but you've got to give yourself permission.
Mhm. And remember that, especially as a young person, there are times where you learn a lot from doing jobs that you hate. I mean, I was once upon a time cooking sausages outside of a supermarket in Durban, South Africa, and I didn't really enjoy it. Sausages, it's boerewors for those in South Africa, and and but I did learn a lot about people and how to give good customer service. And then I've done so many horrible jobs over the years, and sometimes you've just got to embrace them. And maybe, as you say, do a little bit of that influencer stuff in your evenings and weekends, and you might just get there. It's not either or. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And every experience that I've had, like if I think about the path, how, yes, I started with an accounting firm, but very early on in my career pivoted into learning and development, which is what I love. And then moving around in the firm, moving countries, moving into change and behavior change. So every experience has been so pivotal in what I do today and who I am today, and how I show up today. And so nothing has been what's the word? A waste of time. As you
Mm.
say, you learn so many things in every experience that you encounter, and that's why I often say to people, if they're not really very happy in their situations, is to really try and see, what is the lesson here, and really try and sort of seek for the meaning there, and the lesson there, and believing that they are exactly where they're supposed to be. It's hard sometimes to do that.
I like that. You're exactly where you're supposed to be right now, and accepting that, and then moving forward and embracing it. It makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned cybersecurity. I know you're deeply involved in that world. Just a quick diversion. How are people handling the evolving nature of cybersecurity, especially in the age of AI, where I can't even imagine how threats and challenges have escalated now that there is the super intelligence potentially trying to hack your firewall?
Well, it's a game we play, which is a catch up game. I think it's so hard to stay up 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 to speed. It's right. It's so fast paced. It's so
Hmm.
fast changing, and again, it's really the importance here is to also recognize that there's AI, but there's still the human in the loop.
Hmm.
And I think we say, oh, engineers, their roles are going to become redundant, but I've spoken to a few clients recently where we're working with the engineers, and secure coding becoming the norm. And so it's really saying, there's so much context, there's so much critical, deep thinking that needs to happen, which, is just not possible with AI. So, yeah, so I think there's this let's watch this space. But yeah, it's very overwhelming, it's very daunting. And it's in the way we use AI. I see so many people just using it as what's the word? It's like almost like a parrot, garbage in,
Yeah.
garbage out.
Yeah.
but what I'm seeing and where people are really having success, and especially from a security perspective, and seeing the threats and making the connections, is the critical thinking. It is the ability to really draw insights and probe. It's the probing of the AI, which is becoming a super skill, I think.
Yeah, very interesting times. And I know quite a few of our viewers are entrepreneurs, have SaaS platforms and so forth. So it's an evolving area. I mean, I've just created an app with AI, an AI developer, and it is absolutely incredible. I mean, it's a superpower if you use it wisely. Now, back to you. What does your daily practice look like? Bearing in mind, it's about 7 in the morning or something ridiculous for you, and you're full of vitality on a podcast. How do you stay aligned with your truth, with your habits, with your passions?
Do you know, I'm very much on a, and it's going to sound really bizarre because I've been through the, I've got to have this morning routine and it's going to be this long and it's going to be three things. And now for me, the big focus is to really be kind to myself. And it's very much the conversations I have. It's knowing that every day for me is an intense day. But I have the choice when I show up to show up in the way which energizes me, like this morning, and doing what I love. I think it helps that I really spend a big proportion of my day now doing absolutely what I love. I still do the responsible thing, the thing where I have to earn the money to obviously feed the family, and so there's a dance, there's a balance. But for me, it's very much very conscious, consciously showing up, moment to moment, meeting to meeting, and being very intentional with how I show up, and being very kind to myself. And so leaning into it can be easy. It doesn't have to be so hard. It doesn't all have to be hustle, hustle, hustle. And so, yes, I mean, my hygiene factors are in place. I eat well, I exercise, I step away from my computer often. I drink lots and lots of water, 3 to 5 liters a day. So all those basic things, which, I've become habits. But I think for me, the big opportunity now is the being kind to myself and, being responsible towards myself first and foremost.
What are you excited about? And perhaps on that note, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what SOAR is going to turn into once it's ready.
Oh, no idea. So I think what I'm most excited about is actually my physical location where I live. I'm in probably the most beautiful part of the world, Stellenbosch. My house is at the foot of a mountain. I have literally got 180 degree views of the mountains. And I often see the eagles and they soar. And I'm just absolutely amazed, when I see them and how effortless it looks. And how they just, go with the streams of the wind, and then their strength, when they actually come down to pick up their prey. They're actually really, really strong. And so the next evolution is really for me to lean more into nature and to be more connected with, the power of nature, the energy of nature. But yeah, that's the extent, Brad, to to which I've been thinking about it. I haven't really thought about it much more than that.
I love it. It's about gaining perspective and finding altitude in your work and life. I love it. I think it's going to be great. If someone feels stuck and they're listening in at the moment and they're in a toxic work situation, what's a small action step that they can take to reclaim their power and find themselves again?
I mean, it's probably the hardest place to be because it takes as long as it takes to actually, first of all, recognize again that it is a toxic space, and to really know that you are good enough, that you don't need to tolerate the other individual's behavior, or the company is often systemic. It can be company wide, so it's not often it's not just one individual, it can be the organization as well. So Probably not an easy answer because it is ultimately about you taking personal responsibility for you, and prioritizing you. And I know it's not good to hear or nice to hear, or doesn't feel great to hear that you've got to take responsibility, but at the same time, you can only control what you can control, and nobody's coming to save you. So a little bit of tough love here. Nobody's coming to save you, and if your health is suffering, it's not a sign of weakness to step away and take some time off. Get your doctor to actually book you off for a few days, for a few weeks. I refused to do that. I was like, no, if I do that, then the bully has won. I am not going to show him that he has won. And ultimately, that led to serious health issues and ultimately to my burnout. So, if you're in a situation where you can navigate it still, you can manage it still, perhaps just take some time out to just get some perspective. But ultimately, you have to take responsibility for you.
Such good advice. And just get started with something rather than wallowing. I often think, am I being a victim or am I being a creator in this situation? I don't want to be the victim of this circumstance. I want to create my world and my environment. And even that is quite empowering. It's a shift in how you think about situations. Anything else you'd like to share with our audience? I know that you've got a survey and various other things, books, links. Where would you like people to go?
Yeah, so I mean, I am writing, as we said, my second book now, more, and due to be published by the end of the year. Currently, I'm running a work wellbeing survey, so I'd love people to complete that. So, Brad, if you could perhaps include that in the show notes, the link to the survey. But I'm posting weekly on LinkedIn as well, so I'd love for you to connect with me, Marilise de Villiers Basson, on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place. If you would love to reach out, you can send me a personal note, and we can start the conversation there. That's probably the easiest and the best way to do that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure as always to connect, and thank you for sharing your story. Any final thoughts for those who stuck with us all the way to the end?
I just would love to say, life is so short, and we can be such criticizers of ourselves. I think I would so love to just invite everybody to almost look at yourself from someone else's perspective, and just think about all the amazing things that you would say to yourself from someone else's perspective, and just give yourself a moment, recognize for a moment how amazing you are and how much you have to give this world. I truly believe that each and every one of us have all the power inside of us to make all our dreams come true. And so, what is it that you love? And give yourself permission to dream, and give yourself permission to dream big.
Thank you so much, Marilise. Everyone, thank you for joining. Check out the links in the show notes. Do connect with Marilise, and I'll see you in the next episode.